Artificial intelligence is kind of top of mind for a lot of people, particularly in the IT and business world, because it's getting so much broad coverage, and a lot of that's because of the ChatGPT app.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process. Welcome to the next episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers, and in each of these episodes, I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with process practitioners, those that are putting the many different areas and aspects of business process management into practice day in and day out in across a wide range of organizations. And today, I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Geoff Armstrong, who we have had on the podcast before. A number of episodes back now, and if you are joining us for the first time, we are into the 150, 160 episodes. We've been going for a couple of years now. We've got quite a library, a database of different practitioners that you'll be able to learn from and glean from there. But very excited for this second conversation with Geoff. So Geoff, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Thanks for having me back, Dan. Nice to talk to you again.
So I know that, Geoff, your main area of focus is around in the topic of process mining, and it's a very popular topic. I think a lot of people have heard of process mining. Most people in this space would have heard of process mining now. I think that not everyone is putting it into practice, and in particular in this region, I think it's there's a lot of unknowns there when it comes to process mining, and how should organizations prepare themselves for it, and how do they know that they're ripe for using process mining technology. But I guess an interesting and more recent topic of conversation has been this whole thing of artificial intelligence, and really been made mainstream by applications like ChatGPT, which has put it on everyone's radar. My mum and dad are talking about it, and they don't even know anything about AI or artificial intelligence, and I think it's just on everyone's radar now. But can you talk to us a little bit about how is artificial intelligence intersecting with the work that you're doing with process mining? Or what have you been seeing? What do you think what are the more exciting kind of advancements that are happening at the moment?
Yeah, no, thanks, Dan. It's an interesting topic, and as you said, artificial intelligence is kind of top of mind for a lot of people, particularly in the IT and business world, because it's getting so much broad coverage, and a lot of that's because of the ChatGPT app. But actually, if we throw our minds back a bit, the term artificial intelligence, came about in the 50s from some research, and it's gone through various peaks and troughs of enthusiasm down to despair. I remember back in the late 80s, I was working for IBM, and expert systems was all the rage at the time. I think what's happened at the moment, though, is because the ChatGPT, which is like a super chatbot, really, is accessible to you and I. I had a bit of a muck around with it earlier this morning. I've been using it before, but I just thought I'd put some of the topics that we're going to talk about through it just to actually see what came up, and it was interesting. It was interesting, and so I think that's why there's now such a focus on it. So I'm not an AI guy. I'm a process mining guy. I'm an old SAP guy, but I'm a process mining guy now. And so some of the things we can talk about today are just where I'm starting to see AI starting to poke its head into the process mining world.
Yeah, fantastic. And for the organizations that you've been working with, and obviously coming from that process mining perspective, are you noticing teams of AI experts or practitioners or establishing themselves as a bit of a center of excellence, a central group, or is it more, is the topic more coming up in the data space, and that's where it's intersecting with process mining, or how's it coming being brought up in different conversations?
That's an interesting question. So I think the clients who have a big technical investment in this. They would build their own AI teams, and they're quite specific. But what I'm seeing is the process mining tool sets that we deal with, Solanus and Signavio and others, Aprimor, etc. They've got a framework that they deal with. So we get the data, we turn it into event logs, we can see what's going on. We're trying to figure out how to make processes more efficient, more conformant, et cetera, more automated as well. So automation is a big one. RPA and things like that is always a big topic, and spoke before in the previous podcast about how we can use process mining to try and identify those areas where RPA might be actually very useful. So the kind of areas where we see the AI starting to poke its head through it's a bit similar to the conversational ChatGPT. So there's always been now for years and decades actually, there's been like a move to try and just allow people to use natural language questions to interrogate systems. We tried this with BI systems for many years as well, and that had some success. I think that I think they used large language models in things like ChatGPT to interpret. So you and I would ask like a natural question, and it would then feed back a response. Now, if we use ChatGPT as an example, if you put a question in, what I tend to find is it scours the available information, maybe on the web or whatever its data sources are, and gives me back a nice summary of topics. But I found if you're approaching it from like an expert level of your topic, didn't really give me notes, just went, oh, well, there's a nice summary of particular things. Now, from a process mining point of view, where that would be extremely useful is we work with SMEs who are very expert in the process. We give them great insights using the data from process mining, but it's actually the combination of the two things. The SMEs know why things are going on. Process mining tells us, what, when, where, and who actually did things. And so to kind of take that to like another step, to be able to actually ask questions, not necessarily with our voice, but just typing them in and, tell me the root cause of delays, show me the compliance issues that I've got, show me the process bottlenecks, those type of things. They're things that would be useful particularly for end users. So the SMEs that we deal with become quite expert in utilising the system to answer those questions. But if you then want to push it out a little bit further, then to have those questions available for the users rather than having to formulate their own queries and do drill downs and things, I think that's a step forward.
Right. So instead of people having to instead of it being limited to technical users that understand what buttons they have to press and what they have to enter in to get the answers they're looking for, do you think that it's going to make maybe it more accessible to senior leaders as one example, where they can enter in maybe more of a basic question like where are the bottlenecks in the cash to order lead to order process, show me that. And so I guess the ability to interact with a process mining system is going to become more intuitive. Do you think that's really, is it going to make it easier to tackle process mining? Maybe.
So what I've seen so far is, and again, I'm somewhat biased because I'm a Solanus guy, so that's kind of my tool of choice in the process mining area. And what they've actually come up with is an end user capability they call Business Miner. And so from their experience of doing 2,000 process mining projects, they've actually pulled out for the core processes being procurement, accounts payable, order to cash, and AR, where there's lots and lots of known KPIs, known root causes, known issues, business problems that you're trying to tackle. And they've actually formulated that into a series of questions, right? So any process mining tool should be able to go, well, show me the root cause of this, show me where the delays are, give me something which is, tell me, give me all the data from the last 6 months where the throughput time is more than 20 days. So they're all things that could be interpreted and then brought out. And they're kind of generic things around process mining, but more value, I think, is when we get to specific business process specific questions. So if we were dealing with procurement, I'm interested to know what's my contract coverage rate, what's my vendor performance levels and those type of things. You can't just ask that. The system needs to know, needs to semantically figure out what are those things, and even simple things like show me all the late orders. What's late mean? So we need to parameterize it to a certain extent. And so what the Slonis guys have done with Business Miner, I think, is quite interesting. They've taken those core areas and they've come up with some common questions like, who's the worst performer for my on-time delivery rate, things such as that. And so that they've taken all the knowledge of the various projects and they've encapsulated it as content of like, here's a whole series of standard questions, which if you work through those, that will give you some good outcomes in terms of process mining. So I think that is a good starting point. I think I'm just typing things randomly into ChatGPT. I mean, think about your own experience with ChatGPT. Depending on the phrasing of the question, completely influences the quality of the answer that I actually get back. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think that, you mentioned that if you're an expert in your field, it's not going to really give you much. It'll give you a high level summary at best.
I think my opinion was it gave me like a nice checkpoint of things to think about, but didn't give me everything else was already, I already knew that, but it just gave me like a nice structure. Actually, one of the interesting ones I did the other day, I just went, write me a statement of work for a process mining project, and came back and it was pretty good. So I'd found lots of good stuff on the web and goes, yeah, there you go. And so that was just a little bit of fun. But you'll find that quite often you'll get we're not allowed to answer that question. That data is not available, blah, blah. So it's limited by where it's getting the data from. A lot of the ChatGPT stuff is getting it from, web crawler type technology. And so from a process mining point of view, I think over time you might find that the big vendors will either buy like an AI provider and embed it within their tool set. What they're doing at the moment is they're building some of these not simpler, but kind of easier to use predefined content going, here's the standard questions that you want to ask for P2P, AP, order to cash, and AR. And then the user just goes, yep, that question. And then that question leads to another question. That question leads to another question. And then finally you get down to a set of root causes where you need to take some action. So, I mean, one of the things that you might find is the delivery rates are too slow for your customers because we've got some credit blocking or something. And so you can find this stuff via simply drilling down if you know where to go. But what AI type things give us is the ability to surface that in an easier way. So Dan, here's all of your blockages for the last 3 days, which are now going critical, if we can put some parameters around that. So it's about making it easier, more accessible for the users. But I don't think it's going to be a free-for-all where you just go, I'm just typing stuff in and it magically gives it to me. We've still got to code that. We've still got to set up the parameters. The parameters are most important, and we've got to make it in the context of what's going on within a particular business, I think.
Great. No, that's good. And from the conversations I've had with many people that are diving into this process mining space, I guess the resounding feedback I've heard so far is the bulk of the heavy lifting is to do with the quality of the data that you're putting into the tool, and depending on how much pre-work you do with the data is going to impact the outcome or the results. Once you can put that data into a tool, it's very quick to get the different answers that you might be looking for. Is AI going to have a part to play in the whole data side? So before we even diving into the tool, is AI going to help organizations and some of them with many old, large legacy systems that have been embedded into organizations for decades. And, maybe I've heard it said many times like, we've got such a mess with our data. We won't be able to do anything with process mining for a number of years. I'm just wondering, is AI going to play a significant part in that space to speed up the whole, cleaning up the data, basically?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So you're right. The quality of the data is really important. Now, I think it depends on the process that we're talking about. So again, I'm an SAP guy, so I don't care. Well, I don't care what your business is. If you've got SAP, you might have made some customizations around the outside, but the core of those main processes, the data looks the same. I'm sorry. I can go to any client in the world, and I know what that field is called that. And you might have some extra Z ones, you might have some other functions around it, fine. But the data is from an ERP system for process mining. It's just beautifully structured. I mean, it's really great. Now, one of the things you might find, and where something like an AI would be good, would be to look for where we've got gaps in the data. So master data is an obvious one, and where we've got crap master data, so the vendor or the customer, that's so common. People just don't maintain their master data properly. The transaction's going through and it picks it up, and as long as you've got enough to actually do the posting, it goes in. But then, I'm missing like an account manager from this particular field, or, I want to go and talk to the customer, but I haven't got any contact details, all that kind of stuff. There are some good tools around to help with that master data management stuff, but I think that AI could take that to another level. And then by inference, the better data then helps us in process mining. I think for some of the more bespoke processes, ones that aren't so well understood, I think maybe AI could help to understand what the process actually is. So again, a lot of the sorry to go back to SAP all the time, but that's kind of where I've been living for 30 years. Because the data model is so well known and the processes are so well known from a theoretical point of view, we've got great algorithms to actually take the data from the change logs and actually turn it into an event log, very, very quickly. So that's not an issue. That's not an issue for us at all. Doing that. It's actually more of an issue kind of getting the data, getting permission from the client to say, I'm actually allowed to use your data. But once we've got access to that, in the 12 or so projects that we've done in the last couple of years, the data's all good. The client may not use all the functionality. So one of the things we found is sometimes it's a bit sparse. So they're able to use like a small sliver of that. So again, back to your original point, I think that there's definitely a big role for data preparation and enhancement for AI to help with that. Yeah. And again, just thinking about AI. So I mean, I just went back to look at some of the definitions. It's really anything that a human could do manually, but we can get a system to automate if we possibly can. So the more we can do that stuff, the better it is. And you're right on the money there. So the data quality is a big one for all IT systems, obviously.
Great. And when speaking of automation, how do you see AI playing a part in that respect? Because I from my understanding, process mining, a lot of the process mining work or a considerable amount is feeding into automation initiatives, RPA, making sure that we've got optimized processes before we execute, or automate these processes. How do you have any thoughts around AI and process automation and what that's going to look like?
Yeah, so when we say automation, so RPA is kind of a bit of a headline topic at the moment. And it's very much about, we've got simple things like, I just want to create a bunch of transactions from a spreadsheet and I just pump them into the system. That's kind of the simplest thing. And typically we're trying to make one step in the process go faster. That's a bit primitive. Things like UiPath are actually very nice for doing like guided procedures. So like just follow the bouncing ball, fill these things in. A little bit like I was talking about with the business miner, but the business miner is actually driving you through from like a question and answer point of view. And the thing that's actually already embedded in something like Celonis is we could could drill down, find some things, and then take some action. But because we've got so many data points, I mean, literally tens of millions of data points in every project, it's impossible. And so one of the things we want to do is identify those things that we want to pull out and then actually get the system to monitor it. So automatic monitoring of outliers and anomalies is where AI is playing a part. So you find that most of the big vendors, they've already got this kind of AI type functionality and algorithms that you can set up and just go, I'm looking for everything which is late to a customer by more than 2 days, and please surface all of those. Then the automation piece that comes in is, once I've actually surfaced that using AI, to then be able to take an action. Now, that may require some decision from a human like you or me, or there may be some things where you go, if this particular thing is exceeded, then I want you to do this step. So once credit gets up to this point, I want you to automatically block something over here. That could be. So it's not that AI will give us automation. It's another tool in the kit to help surface where we can automate things, or we could block things.
Sure. Great. And do you foresee any challenges or limitations with this whole process mining and artificial intelligence space?
I think the one that sticks out to me, and we've got it now anyway, is data privacy and security. So I must admit, when I signed up for ChatGPT, I felt a bit nervous about putting any kind of password in there or any kind of details that could identify me. And we're going like, oh, well. So I know it's like a bit of paranoia, but it's like all this hype. What else could be done to identify that to something else? That's the big concern we've got at the moment. So we've got these same concerns now around data privacy and security. And so if we do anything with like a European client, we've got the general data processing requirements, the GDPR stuff. So people are, I'm sure you would have found yourself, people are extremely touchy about their own data. And so I think the answer to that one comes down to the type of process that you're actually doing. So again, if we're doing procurement, AR, AP, order to cash, plant maintenance, they're all internal things about the company. And so, we need to not expose that to other companies or competitors. Fine. And there might be some sensitivities around contracts, but that's all normal kind of business stuff, right? Probably a bigger issue is if we're accessing HR-related processes and all the individual HR-related things, then the privacy concerns go through the roof, because that's, Dan, he's 28, he's male, he lives here, this is his income. So all those type of things that you go, hold on, I don't want any of that stuff exposed to the rest of the world. So your normal business kind of processes, that's just, we're dealing with that now. But anything that touches HR-related things, you really need you need to think very carefully about that. Now, whether AI gives a higher level of concern about that, like if you can take that data and then you've got some algorithms that could then, create, as you were saying before, create bias or pigeonhole certain types of people, I think that's of concern. So I think that would be something just to raise, depending on the type of process you're actually looking at.
Yeah, great. And we'll have a lot of people listening to this conversation and, aware of AI and aware of process mining, but maybe not haven't spent so much time thinking about, what does the future of the work that we're doing as process practitioners, what does that look like? What does it look like when every organization has a process mining tool and is using different sort of elements of artificial intelligence? There are plenty of organizations out there that are still going through, basic forms of mapping processes in a Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or Visio or something like that. And it's, oftentimes just collecting dust stored away in some kind of pocket of their document management system. But for those individuals that are listening, that that what we want to prepare ourselves for the future. We want to make sure that we've got the skills and knowledge for what's to come. What would your advice be, or your encouragement be, to process practitioners, business analysts, maybe those that are diving into the space? What should they be aware of, or what should they be preparing themselves to be aware of, or to learn, or to upskill with such a fast-changing environment? I mean, we got these big companies, Salonis, Signavio, Apremore, from a process mining perspective. I'm sure we're going to see significant changes in the next 2, 3, 5 years. How do we best prepare for that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't. Well, I'm not a technical guy by background. I'm actually a business guy. And so I'm like a business consulting background with a little bit of, a little bit of IT flavor that I've learned along the way. And so I spent a career just learning applications and trying to figure out where the next thing is that I could earn some dollars. So I've got a bit of track record in this. And so I tend to look at so those big companies, where are they taking it? Right? So I personally, I mean, if you're an IT person, if you're a programmer, maybe you want to run off and learn some Python and stuff like that. But from a business consultant's point of view, I'm just looking to follow where the big players are going. So again, as I'm a Salonis guy, and we're partners, I get to see where these guys are taking things, and they're doing a few interesting things as well. There's always a concern that when you do talk about AI and all this kind of stuff, that you're going to go off into some dystopian future. But actually, I would hope that we can utilize it to actually get things to a higher level of conversation. So if you think about the evolution of where we've come from, back in the olden days, we'd be sitting in workshops and arguing about what a process actually looked like, and no one could agree, blah, blah, blah. And so we spent a lot of time doing that in an SAP implementation. Now we go in and we actually take the data and we present back and we go, that is what your process looks like. So you've got to like a higher level of conversation much, much quicker. I would hope that AI can then be used to get us to an even higher level discussion much, much quicker in looking at automatically surfacing where are the outliers, what are the trends? Are there some correlations that we can make, if I'm doing this, better analysis of root causes, etc. So that's one thing. I think a couple of other things that are coming up are what's known as multi-perspective process mining. So at the moment, a process mining event log basically looks at an individual process. So we do P2P, AP, order to cash, AR, and they're all individual things. Now you can build like a super one, but it's a bit complicated and gets a bit hairy. So some new technology that's just coming on at the moment is this multi-event log. So we can still have our individual ones, but actually combine them together. And then you could actually go, right, I'm starting at this point here, and I want to see the time frame all the way through to the end of another process over here. So typically, like something like accounts payable, it's all upstream stuff, which is the problem. I've got an invoice stuck in the VIM system, or someone didn't do a goods receipt. Why is that? And so we need to be able to go across the processes to see it. That's a really exciting one coming. And again, a lot of that is kind of AI related algorithms and things going on. I think also kind of real-time extraction and alert monitoring. Again, I come back to the monitoring. These algorithms and these rules that we can build, we can use that to surface these things automatically. So those things that we could do manually by simply drilling down, if we could just use those things, use AI to surface them in an easier way, I think that would be really good. So just a final thing on the kind of the ChatGPT thinking. I think that those type of kind of freewheeling questions would be really good in a discovery phase. In other words, we're trying to figure out what's happening with the process. But we kind of go from discovery. What are the KPIs? What are the prioritized things that we want to do? We enable the team, and then we're trying to get them to optimize. So when we're in optimization, we should already know what are the priorities. I've found 20 things that can be changed. Work with the change management team, work with the SMEs to go, here's the things that we actually need to get changed. And that a lot of time that comes down to not just system stuff, but working with people to change their behavior. So I think those kind of things. I think the freewheeling ChatGPT stuff is already there in a couple of vendors, and that would be interesting in the discovery. I'm always I'm always just cautious about creating a free for all with users. So we just go, yep, just ask any question you want, and then it's not an efficient way to go. So you've got to have some context. You've got to go, right, I want you to, what are the questions that you want to understand in this particular process? And then we've got like a focused conversation. But from like I think there could be some interesting stuff come out in the discovery phase. That maybe the way we're doing it at the moment, maybe it gives us a few extra things there, I hope.
Totally, yeah. I think there'll be many applications for, a tool like, or there is many applications for a tool like ChatGPT. And I think as you're saying towards the beginning, I think it comes down to the questions you ask it, and and the answers that you're looking for. And I think that it's how I kind of look at it is it's not going to make you an expert in a particular field, but if there's a part of your role that needs doing that maybe you're not skilled in, it'll get you to 70% of the way there, or something like that.
I think that's right. I think so. From the work we do with the SMEs in a project, we want to and the stuff we've got from the Salonis teams, we want to try and embed that in the organisation. So the people who haven't been involved in that, maybe the non-experts, can then stand on the shoulders of those people. And then utilise that. So again, we're trying to get the conversation to a higher level. That's the plan of attack.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's great. Well, Geoff, I just want to thank you for catching up with me again. I know this whole topic of AI, it's at the forefront of everyone's mind, but I think people they're looking at it as a bit of a rabbit hole in terms of when you dive into it, it's like, oh my goodness, practically what does it look like for me and my current organization? Who really knows? But it's good to know that there are people like yourself that are diving into this space and understanding some of the concepts or maybe what the future looks like, and obviously having the connections that you do to the Salonises of the world. You're going to be at the forefront of knowing what's coming in the future. So just want to thank you for sitting down with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, thanks, Dan. Always good to catch up.